The sleek black limousine pulled up to the dilapidated garage, its polished exterior a stark contrast to the rusted metal and crumbling concrete. Inside, Marcus stared in disbelief at the elegantly dressed woman stepping out, the same woman whose glasses he'd fixed with scraps the day before. She smiled, extending an envelope that would change his life forever. "Sometimes," she said, "the hands that can fix what others discard are exactly the hands that can build what others can't even imagine." Before we carry on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit the subscribe button for something special tomorrow. The scent of motor oil and rust hung heavy in the garage air, as Marcus Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow with a grease-stained rag. At 32, his shoulders already carried the weight of a man who'd worked twice as long. The day had been particularly brutal. 3 oil changes, a transmission flush that took twice as long as it should have, and a carburetor rebuild that the customer would likely haggle over when it came time to pay. Such was life at Reeves Repairs, tucked away on the fading industrial edge of Westbrook, a city that had seen better days. The afternoon sun slanted through the dirty windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the golden beams. Marcus glanced at the ancient wall clock. 6:42 p.m. His stomach growled, reminding him that lunch had been a hastily eaten sandwich at noon. He contemplated closing up shop early. Business had been slow, lately painfully slow, and the stack of unpaid bills in his office drawer was growing taller by the week. "Just one more hour," he muttered to himself, a mantra he'd repeated too many times to count. One more hour might bring one more customer, one more chance to make ends meet. The radio crackled in the background, an old country song about hard times and lost dreams. Marcus couldn't help but smirk at the irony. He'd inherited the garage from his father 7 years ago, along with a toolbox full of dreams. His father had built this place from nothing, turning it into a thriving business that had once been the heart of the local community. But that was before the big auto repair chains moved in, before the economy tanked, before the neighborhood started its slow, inevitable decline. Marcus moved toward his workbench, absently organizing tools that were already meticulously arranged. His hands were his most valuable possession, strong, scarred, and possessing an almost preternatural dexterity. Those hands could diagnose an engine problem by touch, could feel the difference between a bearing that was merely worn and one that was about to fail catastrophically. Those hands had saved countless customers from expensive replacements when a careful repair would do. The sound of hesitant footsteps on the concrete outside pulled Marcus from his thoughts. He turned to see a woman standing uncertainly at the open garage bay, squinting as she peered inside. She was in her early 40s, dressed in simple jeans and a plain gray hoodie that seemed a size too large. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and a pair of badly damaged glasses sat askew on her nose, held together by what appeared to be a bent paperclip. "Hello?" she called, her voice cultured but timid. "Are you still open?" Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and approached. "Yes, ma'am. What can I help you with? Car trouble?" The woman shook her head, then winced as her glasses slipped further down her nose. She pushed them back up with a finger. "No, nothing like that. This is embarrassing, but I was wondering if you might have any tape for my glasses. They broke earlier, and I can't see a thing without them." Up close, Marcus could see that the frame had snapped clean through at the bridge, and the makeshift paperclip repair was barely holding. The woman was squinting painfully, clearly struggling to focus. "That paperclip's not going to cut it for long," Marcus observed, studying the damage with a professional eye. "Mind if I take a look?" After a moment's hesitation, the woman handed over her glasses. Marcus carried them carefully to his workbench, where the strongest light in the garage shone down. The frames were expensive, one's designer titanium with spring hinges, but they'd clearly been through several repairs already. The current break was at a stress point where previous damage had weakened the metal. "Tape won't hold for long either," Marcus said, almost to himself as he examined the break. "Not with the way this is fractured." The woman had followed him to the workbench, standing awkwardly as she tried to make out what he was doing. Without her glasses, her eyes were a striking emerald green, though currently narrowed in concentration. "I just need something to get me through until tomorrow," she explained. "I have a spare pair at home, but I'm stuck here until my ride arrives in about an hour. Marcus considered the broken glasses, turning them over in his calloused hands. Then, making a decision, he reached for a small drawer under his workbench. I think I can do better than tape. If you don't mind waiting about 15 minutes. The woman checked her phone, squinting hard at the screen. That would be very kind of you, Mr. Reeves. Marcus Reeves. And it's no trouble. He gestured to a battered but clean chair near the workbench. Feel free to have a seat. It won't take long. As she sat down, Marcus opened the drawer and pulled out a small plastic container. Inside were bits and pieces of metal salvaged from various jobs over the years, scraps most would consider trash, but which Marcus had kept for their potential. He selected a thin piece of titanium wire, a remnant from a motorcycle restoration project he'd completed months ago. These are nice frames, he commented as he worked, partly to fill the silence, and partly because it was true. Titanium's not easy to work with, but it's worth it for the strength-to-weight ratio. The woman seemed surprised by his knowledge. Yes, they're custom-made. I've had them for years too, attached to replace them, I suppose. Marcus nodded, understanding, as he carefully shaped the wire with tiny pliers, his large hands surprisingly gentle and precise. The garage fell quiet except for the occasional sound of metal tools clinking together and the faint music from the radio. I'm Eleanor, by the way, the woman offered after a few minutes. Eleanor Hayes? Nice to meet you, Ms. Hayes, Marcus replied, his attention still focused on the delicate work. What brings you to this part of town? We don't get many visitors around here these days. Eleanor hesitated before answering. I was visiting an old manufacturing facility a few blocks over. Research for a potential project. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. The industrial district had been in decline for years, with more buildings empty than occupied. Anyone looking at property here was either desperate or had vision that others lacked. Almost done, he murmured, reaching for a small butane torch. With expert precision, he heated the titanium wire he'd shaped, then carefully fused it to the broken sections of the frame, creating a seamless bond that was actually stronger than the original connection. After it cooled, he polished the repair area until it blended almost perfectly with the rest of the frame. Let's see how this works, he said, handing the glasses back to Eleanor. She put them on cautiously, then blinked in surprise. They're perfect, she exclaimed, adjusting them slightly. I can't even feel where they were broken. She looked around the garage with newfound clarity. How did you do that? Marcus shrugged, suddenly a bit self-conscious. Just something I picked up over the years. Metal is metal, whether it's in an engine block or a pair of glasses. It's all about understanding how it wants to behave. Eleanor studied him with interest. That's a rare skill, Mr. Reeves. You have remarkable hands. They're good for fixing things, he acknowledged, wiping them on a clean rag. Not much else. Some days. Eleanor reached for her purse. What do I owe you for this? Marcus waved away the offer. Nothing. Wasn't a big job. But your time and expertise really, it's fine, he insisted. Consider it neighborly goodwill. We look out for each other around here. Or at least they used to. He thought but didn't say. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but instead nodded graciously. Thank you. That's very kind. She glanced around the garage again, taking in details she couldn't see before the meticulously organized tools, the clean work areas despite the building's overall dilapidation, the hand-painted sign that read, Reeves' Son, fading on the wall. Have you been in business long? She asked. The garage has been here for 30 years, Marcus explained, returning tools to their proper places. My dad started it. I took over after he passed. He taught you well, Eleanor observed. Something in her tone made Marcus look up. There was a perceptiveness in her gaze that hadn't been there before, or perhaps he simply hadn't noticed it when she was squinting. For a brief moment, he felt as though he were being evaluated, though he couldn't imagine why. He did, Marcus agreed, memories of his father's patient instructions flooding back. Taught me everything I know. The sound of a phone chiming broke the moment. Eleanor checked her device. That's my ride. I should head out. She extended her hand. Thank you again, Mr. Reeves. I genuinely appreciate your help. Marcus shook her hand, noticing the softness of her palm against his calloused one. "Anytime, Ms. Hayes. Take care of those glasses now." "I will," she promised with a smile that transformed her face, making Marcus realize she was more striking than he'd initially thought. "Perhaps our paths will cross again." As she walked out of the garage bay and onto the cracked sidewalk, Marcus watched her go with a curious feeling he couldn't quite identify. There had been something about Eleanor Hayes, something beneath the unassuming exterior that struck him as significant, though he couldn't put his finger on what it was. He shook his head and returned to closing up shop for the day. Whatever it was, it didn't matter now. She was gone, and tomorrow would bring another day of struggle to keep the garage afloat. One small act of kindness wouldn't change that reality. By the time Marcus locked up the garage and headed to his small apartment above the shop, thoughts of the woman with the broken glasses had already faded, replaced by more pressing concerns about next month's rent and the parts supplier who was threatening to cut him off if he didn't clear his outstanding balance. The apartment was sparse, but clean: one bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a combined kitchen and living area that had seen better days. The furniture was mismatched and worn, much of it inherited from his father along with the business. Marcus heated up leftover pasta from the night before and ate standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone to check the next day's appointments. 2 oil changes, a brake job if the parts came in, and a diagnostic on an SUV with an electrical problem. Not enough to make a dent in his financial troubles, but better than nothing. He'd been surviving on better than nothing for too long now. After a quick shower, Marcus settled on the couch with a dog-eared copy of an engineering textbook. He'd been teaching himself advanced automotive electronics, hoping to expand the services he could offer. Learning came easily to him, but formal education had never been in the cards, not after his mother's illness had drained the family's savings, not after his father needed him in the garage full-time. He read until his eyes grew heavy, then dragged himself to bed. As he drifted off to sleep, his last thoughts were of titanium frames and green eyes squinting in concentration. There had been something familiar about Eleanor Hayes, but exhaustion claimed him before he could place the memory. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through blinds that didn't quite close and the blaring of an alarm that had been set unnecessarily early for years. Habit drove Marcus through his morning routine: coffee, protein bar, quick check of fluid levels, and tire pressure on his ancient pickup truck that he'd coaxed back to life more times than he could count. By 7:30, he was downstairs in the garage, preparing for the day ahead. The first appointment wasn't until 9, which gave him time to follow up on parts orders and sort through the stack of invoices he'd been avoiding. The numbers were grim, as he'd expected. Another month like the last one, and he might have to let go of Lewis, the part-time helper who came in 3 afternoons a week. The thought made his stomach clench. Lewis was putting himself through community college, and this job, modest as it was, helped cover his books and supplies. Marcus was so absorbed in the financial quagmire that he didn't notice the vehicle pulling up outside until its shadow darkened the garage entrance. He looked up, expecting to see his 9 o'clock appointment arriving early, and froze in stunned disbelief. A sleek black limousine idled at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the morning sunlight like a dark mirror. It was so incongruous in this neighborhood that Marcus momentarily wondered if the driver was lost or having mechanical trouble. The rear door opened, and Eleanor Hayes stepped out. Gone was the plain-clothed woman with the oversized hoodie. In her place stood someone who exuded quiet authority and understated elegance. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, her clothing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that spoke of expense without ostentation. The glasses he'd repaired sat perfectly on her nose, complimenting rather than detracting from her appearance. She approached the garage with confident strides, stopping just inside the bay. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice warmer than he remembered from the previous evening. Marcus stood, wiping his hands reflexively on his coveralls. "Ms. Hayes, this is unexpected." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "I imagine so. I hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial." "No, nothing that can't wait," he assured her, gesturing toward the small customer waiting area. "Would you like to sit down?" Eleanor shook her head. "Actually, I was hoping you might join me for a brief drive. There's something I'd like to discuss with you, and it would be easier to show rather than tell. Marcus hesitated, looking from the immaculate limousine to his grease-stained hands. I'm not exactly dressed for a luxury ride. The car has seen worse, I promise you, Eleanor said, with a hint of amusement. It would only take an hour at most, and I believe it could be worth your while. Curiosity warred with caution in Marcus's mind. He still couldn't shake the feeling that he should recognize this woman beyond their brief interaction the day before. Finally, pragmatism won out. He had no appointments for another hour, and whatever this was about, it had to be more interesting than staring at overdue notices. Let me just lock up, he decided, reaching for the keys in his pocket. A few minutes later, feeling decidedly out of place, Marcus settled into the plush leather seat of the limousine opposite Eleanor. The interior was spacious and tastefully appointed, with subtle technology integrated seamlessly into the design. Nice ride, he commented as the vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb. Not what I expected after seeing you yesterday. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, his handiwork still holding perfectly. Yesterday I was trying not to be noticed. Sometimes anonymity is useful when you're conducting preliminary research. Research into what, exactly? Instead of answering directly, Eleanor removed a tablet from her briefcase and handed it to him. On the screen was a news article with a photo that made Marcus's breath catch. The headline read, Hayes Innovation acquires Westbrook Industrial District for Tech Development Campus. The accompanying photo showed Eleanor Hayes in formal business attire, shaking hands with the mayor at what appeared to be a press conference. The article was dated 3 days earlier. Marcus looked up from the tablet, recognition finally clicking into place. You're that Eleanor Hayes, of Hayes Innovation. His mind raced as pieces fell into place. The Eleanor Hayes who revolutionized modular technology manufacturing. The Eleanor Hayes who's on the cover of Business Week at least once a year. She inclined her head slightly, neither confirming nor denying his statement, but her eyes held a glint of amusement. But why were you wandering around my neighborhood alone? With broken glasses? Marcus couldn't keep the confusion from his voice. Don't billionaire tech CEOs usually travel with an entourage? Entourages attract attention, Eleanor replied simply. I wanted to see the area myself, get a feel for the community. Before the formal announcements began, the broken glasses were an unfortunate accident. I caught them on my jacket zipper while getting out of the car I'd taken earlier. My driver had already left to arrange another matter bio. So, I was temporarily stranded. Until you stumbled into my garage, Marcus finished, still trying to process this revelation. But why come back today? In this? He gestured at the opulent surroundings. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more intent. Because you showed me something yesterday that I found extremely interesting, Mr. Reeves. Something that aligned perfectly with a problem I've been trying to solve. The limousine turned onto the highway, accelerating smoothly as they headed toward the outskirts of town. Through the tinted windows, Marcus watched the familiar landscape of his neighborhood recede, replaced by progressively more affluent areas. I don't understand, he admitted. All I did was fix your glasses. That's precisely it, Eleanor replied. You fixed complex titanium frames with scrap materials and basic tools in under 15 minutes. No formal training. Just intuitive understanding of metallurgy and structural integrity. And you did it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Her gaze was evaluating again, but now Marcus recognized it as the look of someone accustomed to assessing potential and value. It was the same expression his father had worn when examining a particularly challenging engine problem. I've spent the past decade building a company that specializes in innovative solutions, Eleanor continued. Hayes Innovation creates technology that bridges gaps between functionality and affordability, between complex problems and elegant answers. But our newest division is facing a significant challenge. The limousine turned again, passing through an ornate gate into a sprawling property dominated by glass and steel buildings arranged in a campus-like setting. The sign at the entrance read, Hayes Innovation Research Center. This is our current headquarters, Eleanor explained as they cruised along a winding driveway through meticulously landscaped grounds. But we're expanding. The acquisition in Westbrook is part of that expansion on new campus, focused specifically on what we call adaptive technology. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What exactly is adaptive technology? In simplest terms, technology that adapts to human needs rather than forcing humans to adapt to technology, Eleanor replied. Devices that can be repaired rather than replaced, systems that evolve with their users, products designed with longevity and accessibility as primary goals rather than afterthoughts. The limousine pulled up to the largest building, and a uniformed driver opened the door. Eleanor gestured for Marcus to exit first, then followed him onto a curved walkway that led to gleaming glass doors. I still don't understand what this has to do with me, Marcus said as they entered a soaring atrium filled with natural light and the quiet hum of productive activity. Let me show you, Eleanor replied, leading him toward an elevator bank. They rode in silence to the 7th floor, then walked down a corridor lined with laboratories visible through glass walls. In each, teams of people worked with various technologies, some recognizable, others completely foreign to Marcus. Finally, they reached a large corner room where Eleanor used her keycard to gain entry. Inside was what appeared to be a high-tech workshop, filled with equipment both familiar and bizarre. Workbenches lined the walls, some cluttered with projects in various stages of completion. In the center of the room stood a circular table with an embedded holographic display currently showing rotating 3D schematics of what looked like a prosthetic hand. This, Eleanor said with unmistakable pride, is the Adaptive Solutions Lab. The team here focuses on creating technology that can be easily modified, repaired, and customized by users with minimal specialized equipment. The goal is to develop systems that don't become obsolete, that can evolve as needs change. End quote. Marcus moved slowly around the room, his mechanic's eye automatically assessing the tools and projects. He paused at one workbench where what appeared to be a mobile phone had been disassembled, its components laid out in precise order. The problem, Eleanor continued, is that we're approaching this from an engineer's perspective. We design with repairability in mind, but we're still thinking like people who create technology, not like people who repair it. She moved to stand beside him, watching as he instinctively reached toward the disassembled phone before catching himself and pulling his hand back. Go ahead, she encouraged. That's a prototype. The team hit a roadblock trying to make the battery replacement accessible without compromising water resistance. With careful precision, Marcus examined the components, his fingers moving with the same dexterity he demonstrated on her glasses. After a few minutes of silent analysis, he rearranged several pieces and looked up at Eleanor. The problem is the access point. You're trying to make it serviceable from the back, but that means cutting through too many layers. If you shift the battery position and create a dedicated side access port with this gasket design, he indicated a modification with his finger. You maintain the seal and simplify replacement. Eleanor's face broke into a genuine smile. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, Mr. Reeves. The perspective of someone who understands both the theory and practice of repair. Someone who can look at a broken thing and see not just what it is, but what it could be. She moved to the central table and activated the holographic display with a gesture. The image shifted from the prosthetic hand to a detailed architectural rendering of a massive redevelopment, the same industrial area where Marcus's garage was located. This is the Future Hayes Innovation Adaptive Technology Campus, Eleanor explained. Construction begins in 3 months. It will include research facilities, manufacturing space, and community engagement areas where people can learn to repair and modify their own devices. Why? She zoomed in on one section of the plan, and Marcus felt his heart drop as he recognized his garage, marked with a red outline indicating scheduled demolition. You're buying out my lease, he said flatly, the excitement he'd been feeling instantly evaporating. That's what this is about. The fancy tour and the explanation of your vision, it's just softening the blow before you tell me I have to clear out. Eleanor's expression became serious. No, Mr. Reeves. That is absolutely not what this is about. She adjusted the hologram again, and the red outline changed to green. Your garage isn't being demolished. I'm offering you the opportunity to transform it into something more. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew an envelope, which she handed to Marcus. Inside was a formal letter on Hayes Innovation letterhead. As he scanned the contents, his eyes widened in disbelief. "This is—" he began, then stopped, unable to find words. "An offer," Eleanor completed for him. "To head our new innovation repair lab, housed in an expanded and upgraded version of your current garage. You would lead a team focused on developing repair protocols for DAS. All are adaptive technology products. Your expertise in practical repair solutions would inform our design process from the ground up." Marcus stared at the compensation package listed in the letter, a figure with so many zeros that it momentarily didn't register as real money. "This can't be serious." "I assure you, it is entirely serious," Eleanor replied. "What you did with my glasses yesterday demonstrated exactly the mindset we need. You saw a problem, assessed the materials at hand, and created an elegant solution using minimal resources. That's the essence of what we're trying to achieve with adaptive technology." End quote. She gestured at the holographic campus again. "The world doesn't need more disposable technology, Mr. Reeves. It needs approaches that honor craftsmanship and extend usable life. It needs people who understand that repair isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about reimagining what's possible with what TAS already exists." Marcus looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred, permanently stained with the ghost of engine grease that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. Hands that had struggled to keep a dying business alive, that had fixed countless machines others had given up on. Hands that his father had taught to create solutions when none seemed possible. "I'm not an engineer," he said quietly. "I don't have a degree. I'm just a mechanic." "You're not just anything," Eleanor corrected firmly. "You're exactly what Hayes Innovation needs. Someone who sees potential where others see problems. Someone who understands that theory without application is meaningless. Someone who knows, instinctively, how to make things work." She reached up and touched her glasses. "These aren't just functional now. They're better than they were before they broke. That's the difference between repair and innovation, Mr. Reeves. One returns to the status quo, the other improves upon it." Marcus looked around the laboratory again, seeing it with new eyes. Then he looked back at the letter in his hands, at the opportunity it represented, not just financial security, but the chance to make a real difference. To create technology that empowered rather than limited. To build something meaningful from the foundation his father had given him. "I'd need to make sure Lewis has a place in this new setup," he said finally. "He's been loyal, and he deserves a shot at something better too." Eleanor's smile returned. "I think we can arrange that. Would you like to see the preliminary designs for the expanded garage facility? Our architects have some ideas, but I insisted they maintain the character of the original building, including the Reeves sun sign." As she pulled up the designs on the holographic display, Marcus felt something shift inside him, a burden lifting, replaced by a sense of possibility he hadn't experienced in years. The future, which had seemed so constrained just hours before, now stretched before him with unlimited potential. "When do we start?" he asked, a smile finally breaking through his stunned expression. "How about right now?" Eleanor replied, extending her hand. "Welcome to Hayes Innovation, Mr. Reeves." Marcus took her hand, sealing the agreement that would transform not just his life, but potentially the lives of countless others who would benefit from technology designed to be repaired rather than discarded. All because he'd taken a few minutes to fix a pair of broken glasses for a stranger. Sometimes, he reflected, as Eleanor began introducing him to the team who would soon be working under his direction, the smallest acts of kindness opened the most unexpected doors. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the center of what had once been his struggling garage, marveling at the transformation. The building's original brick exterior remained, but the interior had been completely reimagined, expanded, modernized, and equipped with technology that would have seemed like science fiction just a year earlier. The Hayes Innovation Adaptive Repair Lab still, proudly displaying the Reeves Sun sign above the entrance, had become the heart of the new campus. Where once a single mechanic had fought a losing battle against financial ruin, now a team of 20 skilled technicians and engineers worked together to revolutionize how technology was repaired and reimagined. Lewis, No longer just a part-time helper but a full-time employee with a generous education benefit that was helping him complete his engineering degree, was leading a project team focused on modular smartphone technology. His natural talent for electronics, once limited to diagnosing check engine lights, now flourished in an environment that valued innovative thinking. Marcus, the test results from the prosthetic grip sensors came back. Called Sophia, a biomechanical engineer who had initially been skeptical about working under someone without formal credentials, but had quickly become one of his strongest supporters. Your modification increased sensitivity by 38% while reducing power consumption. Marcus nodded acknowledgement as he continued adjusting the prototype on his workbench, a set of auto-adjusting glasses frames, designed for children, capable of growing with the wearer and incorporating replaceable technology modules as needs changed. The irony of his first major project being eyewear wasn't lost on him. A familiar voice from the doorway interrupted his concentration. "How are the Wonder Glasses coming along?" Marcus looked up to see Eleanor Hayes, leaning against the jamb, her signature glasses still sporting his repair perched on her nose. Despite her increasingly busy schedule overseeing the campus development, she made time each week to visit the repair lab and check on progress. "Just putting the finishing touches on the prototype," Marcus replied, gesturing for her to come see. "We solved the flexibility issue without compromising durability." Eleanor examined the glasses with an expert eye. "Impressive. The board is going to love these. Speaking of which, are you ready for your presentation tomorrow?" Marcus felt a momentary flutter of nerves. 6 months ago, the thought of presenting to a corporate board would have been laughable. Now it was just another Tuesday. "As ready as I'll ever be. Lewis helped me prepare the demonstration models." "You'll do fine," Eleanor assured him. "Just talk about the technology the same way you talked about those car engines when you first showed me around the campus site. Passion translates across any audience." Marcus smiled at the memory. In the weeks after accepting her offer, he'd given Eleanor a comprehensive tour of the neighborhood, explaining the history of the industrial district and the potential he saw in buildings others had written off as beyond salvation. His vision for repurposing rather than replacing had influenced the entire campus design, resulting in a development that honored the area's industrial heritage while creating space for future innovation. "How's the community outreach program coming along?" Eleanor asked, moving to examine a tablet display showing usage statistics for the public repair workshop they'd established in a neighboring building. "Better than expected," Marcus replied with pride. "We've had over 300 local residents come through for training sessions. The high school partnership is going strong, 217 students in the internship program now." The community workshop had been Marcus's idea place, where residents could bring their broken devices and learn to repair them under expert guidance. It served dual purposes, providing valuable services to a community that often couldn't afford to replace damaged technology, and creating goodwill for Hayes innovation in an area initially suspicious of corporate development. "Eleanor?" Marcus began, a thought that had been percolating for weeks finally finding voice. "I've been thinking about the next phase. What if we expanded the community program to include entrepreneurship training? Help people start their own repair businesses using our open-source protocols." Eleanor's eyes lit up with interest. "Creating a network of independent repair shops aligned with our philosophy rather than competing with them. I like it. Drop a proposal, and we'll discuss it at the strategic planning meeting next week." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a delivery team carrying a large crate. "Where do you want this, Mr. Reeves?" asked the lead courier. "In the testing bay, please," Marcus directed. Once the delivery team had departed, he turned to Eleanor with barely contained excitement. "It's the salvage server equipment from the decommissioned data center. The components most companies would have scrapped as obsolete. And you're going to work your magic on them," Eleanor concluded, with a knowing smile. Marcus nodded. "With some modifications, they'll be perfect for the community center's new digital literacy program. Better than new, because they'll be designed for easy maintenance and future upgrades." Eleanor regarded him thoughtfully. "You know, when I handed you that offer letter 6 months ago, I believed we were getting an exceptional repair specialist. What I didn't anticipate was finding someone who would fundamentally shift our entire company philosophy." Marcus felt his face warm with the compliment. "I'm just building on the foundation you already created." "No," Eleanor contradicted gently. You've shown us possibilities we hadn't considered. Before you joined, adaptive technology was a product line. Now, it's becoming a movement. She wasn't exaggerating. The work being done in the repair lab had already influenced designs across Hayes's Innovations product categories. The press had taken notice too. Marcus had recently been featured in a Burr Technology magazine article titled, "The Mechanic Revolutionizing Tech Design." The piece had highlighted his unconventional background and approach, positioning him as the vanguard of a new wave of practical innovation focused on sustainability and accessibility. "I have something for you," Eleanor said suddenly, reaching into her jacket pocket. She withdrew a small box and handed it to him. "Consider it a 6-month anniversary gift." Puzzled, Marcus opened the box to find a set of cufflinks crafted from what appeared to be scrap metal specifically, the same type of titanium wire he'd used to repair Eleanor's glasses that fateful evening. "I had them custom-made," she explained, a reminder that sometimes the most significant innovations come from seeing value in what others discard. Marcus ran his finger over the subtle design. Each cufflink bore a tiny engraving of the original Reeves Sun logo. The thoughtfulness of the gift left him momentarily speechless. "Thank you," he managed finally, "for these and for everything else. For seeing something in me that day." Eleanor shook her head slightly. "I didn't give you this opportunity, Marcus. You earned it the moment you chose kindness, without expectation of reward. I just recognized what was already there." Before he could respond, Lewis appeared at the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but the community workshop students are here for the advanced electronics repair class. They're asking for you, Marcus." "You should go," Eleanor encouraged. "Those students are the future of what we're building here." As Marcus gathered his teaching materials, he reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. From struggling mechanic to innovation leader. From financial precarity to comfortable security. From isolation to community. All sparked by a simple act of kindness toward a stranger with broken glasses. "Eleanor," he called as she turned to leave. "I've been meaning to ask, why were you really in my neighborhood that day? The acquisition had already been announced. You could have sent anyone to scout the area." Eleanor adjusted her glasses, his handiwork still holding strong after all this time. "I believe in seeing things for myself," she replied simply. "In touching the materials, walking the ground, feeling the energy of a place before making decisions that affect it. Technical specifications and satellite imagery can tell you facts, but they can't tell you if something has a soul." She glanced around the transformed garage with evident satisfaction. "This place has always had a soul, Marcus. Now it has a future worthy of that soul." As she departed, and Marcus headed toward the classroom, where eager students awaited, he couldn't help but think about the countless small decisions that shaped lives. If he had closed early that evening, if he had simply offered tape instead of attempting a proper repair, if Eleanor had gone to any other shop in the area. But she hadn't, and he hadn't. And now here they were building something revolutionary from the foundations of a humble auto repair shop. Marcus entered the community classroom to find 20 faces turned expectantly toward him. The students ranged from teenagers to retirees, all united by their interest in learning to repair rather than replace. At the front of the room stood a table with various broken devices: laptops with cracked screens, smartphones with battery issues, tablets with malfunctioning charging ports. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus greeted them warmly. "Today we're going to learn something that most technology companies don't want you to know: how to breathe new life into devices they'd prefer you throw away." A ripple of appreciative laughter ran through the room. These classes had become increasingly popular as word spread through the community. What had started as a goodwill gesture was evolving into a genuine movement. "Before we get started," Marcus continued, rolling up his sleeves, "I want to tell you about the philosophy behind what we're doing here. This isn't just about saving money, though that's certainly a benefit. It's about reclaiming ownership of the technology that shapes our daily lives. It's about understanding that repair is an act of empowerment." End quote. As he began demonstrating techniques for diagnosing common electronic failures, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness. This passing on knowledge, creating self-sufficiency, building community was as fulfilling as the cutting-edge work he did in the lab. Perhaps even more so. 2 hours later, as the class wrapped up, one of the younger students approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Reeves? I just wanted to say thanks," the teen said, carefully cradling a laptop he'd successfully repaired under Marcus's guidance. "My mom was going to have to take an extra shift to buy me a new one for school. Now she doesn't have to." Marcus felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced years ago when his father had first taught him to fix rather than discard. The same satisfaction that had kept him going through the lean years when the garage was barely surviving. "That's what it's all about," he told the young man. "Taking care of each other by taking care of the things we already have." After the students had departed, Marcus returned to the main lab to find Louis still working on his modular phone prototype, his face set in concentration as he made minute adjustments to a circuit board. "How'd the class go?" Louis asked, without looking up from his work. "Good, real good," Marcus replied, settling into his own workstation. "Elena's kid finally figured out how to replace that laptop screen. You should have seen his face when it powered up." Luis nodded with understanding. That feeling never gets old. He finally looked up from his project. "You know, sometimes I think about where I'd be if you hadn't given me that part-time job 3 years ago. Probably flipping burgers and struggling to pay for textbooks." "You earned that job," Marcus pointed out. "And you've more than earned your place here." "Still," Louis insisted, "you saw something in me when nobody else did, just like Ms. Hayes saw something in you." The parallel wasn't lost on Marcus. "I guess that's how change happens. One person recognizing potential in another." Louis yawned and stretched. "I should head out. Early class tomorrow." As his protege packed up for the evening, Marcus turned his attention to the prototype glasses on his bench. They were nearly ready for tomorrow's board presentation, a product that could potentially transform the lives of children with visual impairments by growing with them and adapting to their changing needs. The quiet hum of equipment and the faint scent of electronics created a peaceful atmosphere as Marcus worked into the evening, refining and testing. This had become his favorite Tametha building. Mostly empty, the pressure of the day's meetings and demonstrations behind him, just his hands and his ideas working in harmony. A soft knock on the door frame broke his concentration. Marcus looked up to find Eleanor standing there, still dressed in her business attire from earlier, but with a subtle weariness around her eyes that spoke of a long day of meetings. "I thought you'd have gone home by now," he remarked, carefully setting aside the prototype. "I was about to say the same to you," she replied with a tired smile. "The board members arrived early. They'd like to have dinner with you tonight before tomorrow's presentation." Marcus felt a momentary panic. "Tonight? I'm not prepared for just dinner," Eleanor assured him. "No presentations, no pressure. They're curious about the man who's been driving so much positive press for the company lately." Marcus glanced down at his work clothes, clean but casual. Nothing appropriate for dining with corporate executives. "I should go home and change first." "No need," Eleanor said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I took the liberty of having something delivered to your office." Louis helped with the sizing. Sure enough, hanging on the back of his office door was a garment bag containing a perfectly tailored blazer and slacks, with a crisp button-down shirt and the titanium cufflinks Eleanor had given him earlier. "This is becoming a habit, isn't it?" Marcus commented wryly. "You appearing with unexpected offers that change my day's trajectory." "Only when the trajectory needs changing," Eleanor replied. "Besides, these board members flew in specifically to see your work. It would be a shame to make them wait until tomorrow." 30 minutes later, feeling somewhat out of place in his new attire, but bolstered by Eleanor's confidence in him, Marcus found himself seated at a private dining room in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Around the table sat 5 members of Hayes Innovations' board of directors, individuals whose combined wealth and influence could reshape industries with a single decision. "So, Mr. Reeves," began Gloria Chen, the board's chairwoman and a legendary figure in technology venture capital, "Eleanor tells us you've never owned a smartphone until 6 months ago. Is that true?" "Is that true?" Marcus nodded, taking a sip of water to calm his nerves. "Couldn't justify the expense when my flip phone worked just fine for calls and texts, and repairing them for others gave me enough exposure to know how they worked." Instead of the judgment he half expected, Gloria's face lit up with interest. That's precisely the perspective we've been missing. Someone who understands technology without being consumed by it. Tell us about this community repair initiative, prompted another board member, a distinguished older gentleman whose name Marcus recalled was Richard Okafor. Eleanor says it's becoming something of a phenomenon. As Marcus explained the program and its impact on the local community, he gradually felt his tension easing. These weren't just corporate executives interested in profit margins. They were visionaries who had backed Eleanor's unconventional approach to technology development because they shared her values. "What's your long-term vision for the repair lab?" asked Mio Tanaka, the youngest board member and founder of a successful sustainable technology investment fund. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "I believe we have an opportunity to fundamentally change the relationship between people and technology, to shift from a model of planned obsolescence to one of continuous evolution, from disposability to MIT. Durability." He leaned forward slightly, warming to the subject. "Imagine technology that gets better with time instead of becoming obsolete. Devices designed from the ground up to be repaired, upgraded, and personalized by their owners. Systems that adapt to human needs, rather than forcing humans to adapt to them." End quote. "That's a radical departure from the current industry model," Richard observed. "Most tech companies profit from the replacement cycle, which is precisely why we'll win," Eleanor interjected confidently. "The market is ready for change. Consumers are increasingly frustrated with expensive devices that become paperweights after 2 years. Environmental concerns about e-waste are growing. Right now, Hayes Innovation has the opportunity to lead rather than follow." The conversation flowed easily after that, ranging from specific technical challenges to broader philosophical questions about technology's role in society. By the time dessert arrived, Marcus had forgotten his initial nervousness, engaged in passionate discussion about the future they were building together. As the evening concluded and the board members departed with handshakes and expressions of enthusiasm for the next day's formal presentation, Eleanor and Marcus lingered at the table. "They like you," she told him with satisfaction. "More importantly, they believe in your vision." "Our vision," Marcus corrected. "I'm just building on the foundation you created." Eleanor shook her head slightly. "You're too modest. What you've brought to Hayes Innovation goes beyond technical skill. You've reminded us of something essential that too many tech companies forget: that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around." She gazed thoughtfully at her wine glass. "You know, when I founded this company 15 years ago, I had such clear ideals about creating technology that improved lives. Somewhere along the way, market pressures and competition began pushing us toward the same cycles of planned obsolescence as everyone else. Your approach has helped us find our way back to those original principles." Marcus was struck by her candor. In the months they'd worked together, Eleanor had always projected unwavering confidence in her company's direction. This glimpse of vulnerability, of recognition that even visionary leaders could lose their way, deepened his respect for her. "Sometimes we all need a fresh perspective," he offered. "Someone looking at the problem from a different angle." Eleanor smiled at that. "Like a mechanic examining a pair of broken glasses?" "Exactly like that." Marcus returned her smile, amazed at how far that simple interaction had led them both. As they exited the restaurant, Eleanor's driver held the limousine door open. "Can I drop you at home?" she offered. Marcus shook his head. "Thanks, but I think I'll walk. It's a nice night, and it'll help clear my head before tomorrow's presentation." "Speaking of which," Eleanor said, reaching into her bag and producing a small velvet box, "I have one écran. More thing for you." Puzzled, Marcus opened it to find a gleaming fountain pen with his name engraved along the barrel. "For signing the patent applications," Eleanor explained. "The board approved fast-tracking your designs for the adaptive children's glasses. The lawyers will have the paperwork ready after your presentation tomorrow." Marcus stared at the pen, momentarily speechless. "Patents with my name on them? I never imagined." "Get used to it," Eleanor advised with a gentle squeeze of his arm. "This is just the beginning of what you're going to create with us." She stepped into the waiting car, adding before the door closed, "And, Marcus, Thank you for fixing my glasses that day." As the limousine pulled away, Marcus stood on the sidewalk holding the pen case, overwhelmed by the trajectory his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a struggling mechanic facing financial ruin. Now he stood on the precipice of technological innovation that could improve countless lives, surrounded by people who valued not just his skills, but his vision. The cool evening air felt invigorating as he began walking toward his apartment now. Longer the cramped space above the garage, but a comfortable condo closer to the Hayes campus. The neighborhood streets were peaceful, allowing his mind to wander through the events that had led him here. His father would have been proud, he thought. Not of the success or the recognition, but of staying true to the principles he'd instilled. That craftsmanship mattered, that fixing things was an honorable calling, that treating people with kindness was never wasted effort. As Marcus approached his building, he noticed a young woman sitting on a bench near the entrance, frowning at her laptop. As he drew closer, he could see her frustration as she repeatedly pressed a power button to no effect. Some habits were too ingrained to ignore. "Computer trouble?" he asked, pausing beside the bench. The woman looked up with a sigh of exasperation. "It just dawned on me. I have a presentation tomorrow morning, and all my files are on here. Mind if I take a look?" Marcus offered. When she nodded, he sat beside her and examined the laptop. His trained eye quickly spotted signs of a loose power connection, a common issue in that particular model. "I think I can help," he told her, pulling a small multi-tool from his pocket. Some habits never changed, even with new clothes. "It looks like the power jack has come loose from the motherboard. The simple fix if you've got about 10 minutes. The woman's expression shifted from despair to cautious hope. "Really? The repair shop said it would take 3 days and cost $200. "They were overcharging you," Marcus replied, carefully opening the laptop's case with practiced efficiency. And making it sound more complicated than it is. As he worked, explaining each step so she could understand what had gone wrong and how to prevent it in the future, Marcus felt that familiar satisfaction, the simple joy of solving a problem, of making something work again, of helping someone in need. By the time the laptop powered up successfully 10 minutes later, the woman was looking at him with the same amazement Eleanor had shown when he repaired her glasses. "You're a lifesaver," she exclaimed. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. Consider it neighborly goodwill." "At least tell me your name," she insisted as he rose to leave. "So I can thank you properly." "Marcus Reeves," he replied with a smile. "I work at the new Hayes Innovation Campus." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Wait, are you the Marcus Reeves? The one who's revolutionizing repair technology? I just read about you in Tech Weekly." Slightly embarrassed by the recognition, Marcus nodded. "That's me, though the articles exaggerate a bit. They said you were discovered after fixing the CEO's glasses," the woman recalled. "Is that really true?" Marcus gazed up at the night sky, remembering that fateful evening when a simple act of kindness had opened doors he never knew existed. "Sometimes," he said with a quiet smile, "the smallest repairs lead to the biggest opportunities." As he bid the woman good night and continued to his apartment, Marcus reflected on the circular nature of what had just occurred. From one spontaneous repair to another, the pattern continued, small acts creating ripples that extended far beyond their humble beginnings. Tomorrow he would stand before Hayes Innovations Board and present his vision for technology that empowered rather than limited its users. He would show them prototypes born from the lessons his father had taught him in a small garage, now transformed into the heart of a technological revolution. He would sign patent applications with the pen Eleanor had given him, officially becoming not just a repairer, but a creator. But tonight, in helping a stranger with a broken laptop, he had reconnected with the fundamental truth that had brought him to this moment, that there was profound value in the act of repair itself, in seeing potential where others saw only brokenness, in restoring rather than replacing, in bridging the gap between what is and what could be. As Marcus entered his apartment and placed the velvet pen box on his nightstand next to the titanium cufflinks, he felt a deep sense of contentment. His life had been transformed beyond recognition in 6 short months, but his core values remained unchanged: find what's broken, understand its potential, and make it better than it was before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. The expanded community workshop program. The entrepreneurship initiative for aspiring repair specialists. The children's adaptive glasses project that could change lives around the world. All paths that had opened because one evening he had chosen to help a stranger with broken glasses. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys began with the most ordinary acts of kindness. Marcus had always known this, but now he was living proof. As he prepared for bed, energized by the possibilities that lay ahead, he made a silent promise to himself no matter how successful Hayes Innovations' adaptive technology division became. No matter how many patents bore his name or articles featured his work, he would never forget the simple power of fixing what others might discard. In a world increasingly defined by disposability, there was revolutionary potential in the act of repair. And Marcus Reeves, once just a struggling mechanic with gifted hands, was now positioned to share that revolution with the world. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through his bedroom window, Marcus awoke with clarity and purpose. Today marked not just his presentation to the board, but the official launch of Hayes Innovations Adaptive Technology, Division A watershed moment in his improbable journey. He dressed carefully in the clothes Eleanor had provided, attaching the titanium cufflinks with a smile at their symbolism. As he prepared to leave, his phone chimed with a message from Eleanor. "Car waiting downstairs. Board is eager to see what you've created." The sleek company car that awaited him was a far cry from the rusty pickup truck he'd driven for years, but as he settled into the leather seat, Marcus's thoughts weren't on the luxury surrounding him. They were focused on the prototypes carefully packed in his briefcase, particularly the children's adaptive glasses that represented the culmination of his vision. When he arrived at the Hayes Innovation Campus, Eleanor was waiting in the lobby. "Ready for your moment?" she asked with a knowing smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, surprised to find that his nervousness had been replaced by quiet determination. He believed in what they were building. The rest was just details. The boardroom fell silent as Marcus entered behind Eleanor. The same faces from dinner the previous evening regarded him with interest as he set up his demonstration materials. Unlike last night's casual conversation, this was the formal presentation that would determine the future of the Adaptive Technology Division, and with it, Marcus's vision for repairable, evolvable technology. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor began, 6 months ago, Hayes Innovation made a seemingly unconventional choice to place a mechanic with no formal engineering credentials in charge of our most ambitious new division. Today, Marcus Reeves will show you why that decision may be the most important one in our company's history. She nodded to Marcus, stepping aside to give him the floor. Taking a deep breath, he began not with technical specifications or market projections, but with a story. "When I was 10 years old," he told the attentive board members, "my father gave me a broken clock. It was nothing special, just an old alarm clock with gears and springs. He told me if I could fix it, I could keep it. What he didn't tell me was that the lesson wasn't about the clock. It was about seeing possibilities where others saw only problems." Marcus opened his briefcase and withdrew the first prototype, a sleek smartphone, unlike any currently on the market. "This looks like an ordinary phone," he continued, "but it represents a fundamental shift in how we approach technology. Every component is designed to be accessed, repaired, and upgraded by the user with basic tools. The operating system is engineered to improve functionality with age, rather than becoming obsolete." End quote. He demonstrated the phone's modular design, showing how the battery, camera, processor, and other components could be easily swapped without specialized equipment. Then he connected it to a display that showed the device's diagnostic system, a user-friendly interface that identified potential issues before they became failures and provided step-by-step repair guidance. The board members leaned forward with interest, particularly when Marcus showed how the phone could accept aftermarket upgrades from approved third-party developers, creating an ecosystem of innovation around a BRAS central platform designed for longevity. "Now," he said, reaching back into his briefcase, "I'd like to show you something that represents not just our technology, but our philosophy." He withdrew the adaptive children's glasses, his pride and joy of the past 6 months. As he explained their unique properties, the shape memory alloy that allowed them to grow with a child's developing features, the modular prescription lenses that could be adjusted without replacing the entire frame, the integrated augmentation system that could assist children with visual processing disorders. Marcus felt a surge of emotion. These weren't just glasses. They were a promise that technology could adapt to human needs rather than forcing adaptation in the other direction. That access to tools for seeing the world clearly should be available to everyone, regardless of resources. That repair and adaptation were not compromises, but enhancements. When he concluded his presentation an hour later, the boardroom remained silent for several long moments. Marcus stood before them, wondering if he had failed to convey the importance of what they were creating. Then Gloria Chen, the board chairwoman, slowly rose to her feet and began to applaud. One by one, the other board members joined her, until Marcus found himself receiving a standing ovation from some of the most powerful figures in the technology industry. "Mr. Reeves," Gloria said when the applause finally subsided, "I've been in this industry for over 30 years. I've seen countless innovations and revolutionary products. Very few have AA. Genuinely excited me. What you've presented today isn't just a new product line, it's a new philosophy for technology development." Richard Okafor nodded in agreement. "The market is ready for this approach. Environmental concerns, right-to-repair movements, consumer frustration with planned obsolescence, addressing all of these with elegant solutions." "And the children's glasses," added Mio Tanaka, her voice soft with emotion. "Those could transform lives in both developed and developing regions. The modular prescription system alone would make vision correction accessible to communities with limited access to optometrists." Eleanor, who had watched the presentation from the side of the room, now stepped forward. "Then I take it the board approves the full funding package for the Adaptive Technology Division?" "Approved," Gloria confirmed without hesitation. "And we recommend accelerated development of both the smartphone platform and the children's glasses, with priority given to clinical trials for the latter." The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations, with board members lingering to ask specific questions about technical details and implementation timelines. By the time Marcus and Eleanor finally exited the boardroom, it was well past noon. "I believe that calls for a celebration," Eleanor declared as they walked toward the elevator. "Lunch? My treat," Marcus agreed, still processing the enthusiastic reception his vision had received. As they headed toward Eleanor's preferred restaurant on the campus grounds, they passed through the main atrium, where a large display had been installed announcing the launch of the Adaptive Technology Division. To Marcus's surprise, his own image featured prominently alongside Eleanor's, with the tagline, "Reimagining our relationship with technology." "When did that go up?" he asked, momentarily taken aback by the public nature of his new role. "This morning," Eleanor replied, with a satisfied smile. "I had confidence in the board's decision, and in you." As they continued toward the restaurant, Eleanor's expression became more thoughtful. "You know, Marcus, when my glasses broke that day, I was in your neighborhood for a very specific reason. I'd been searching for someone exactly like you." Marcus looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Hayes Innovation was founded on principles of sustainability and accessibility," she explained as they walked. "But as we grew, we became more conventional in our approach. I recognized we were losing our way, focusing too much on competing with traditional tech companies and not enough on our original mission." She adjusted her glasses, still sporting his repair, and continued. "I knew we needed someone who understood repair not just as a technical process, but as a philosophy. Someone who could see the intersection of craftsmanship, sustainability, and innovation. I'd been visiting small repair shops throughout the region for weeks, looking for that person." "So, when you came into my garage with broken glasses?" Marcus began, putting the pieces together. "It wasn't entirely coincidental," Eleanor admitted. "I'd heard about your reputation for fixing the unfixable, but I hadn't planned on my glasses actually breaking. That was genuine bad luck. Or perhaps good luck, as it turned out. Seeing how you approached that repair told me everything I needed to know about your potential." They reached the restaurant and were immediately shown to a private table overlooking the campus grounds. After they ordered, Eleanor raised her water glass in a toast. To fixing what's broken, she said with warm sincerity. Whether it's glasses, technology, or business models. And to seeing potential where others don't look, Marcus added, thinking of all the people who'd benefited from the community workshop program, people whose potential was being unlocked by access to knowledge and tools previously beyond their reach. As they enjoyed their meal, conversation turned to the future, the rollout plans for the smartphone platform, the clinical trials for the children's glasses, the expansion of the community workshop program to other cities. So much had been accomplished in 6 months, yet it felt like they were just getting started. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, Eleanor said as their plates were cleared away. The board has approved a new position, Chief Innovation Officer for Adaptive Technology. They'd like you to take it. Marcus blinked in surprise. Me? A C-suite position? Eleanor, I don't have the corporate experience for what you have is far more valuable, she interrupted gently. Vision, integrity, and a fundamental understanding of what we're trying to build. The corporate structure can be learned. Your perspective cannot. She reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. Think about it. We're not asking you to become a conventional executive. We're creating a role that leverages exactly who you are and what you bring to Hayes Innovation. As they left the restaurant and walked back toward the adaptive repair lab, Marcus contemplated this unexpected development. 6 months ago, he'd been struggling to keep his father's garage afloat. Now, he was being offered a leadership position at one of the world's most innovative technology companies. The campus was bustling with activity as ass. They made their way through the grounds. Employees greeted Eleanor with respect, and Marcus with growing recognition. Word of the successful board presentation had already spread. When they reached the lab, Marcus was surprised to find it decorated with balloons and a banner reading, "Congratulations." Louis, Sophia, and the rest of the team had prepared a small celebration, complete with a cake shaped like the adaptive glasses prototype. Word travels fast, Marcus commented with a smile. I might have given them a heads up about the likely outcome, Eleanor admitted. They've worked just as hard for this moment. As the team gathered around to celebrate their collective achievement, Marcus found himself overwhelmed with gratitude. These talented engineers and designers had taken a chance on his unconventional leadership, embracing his vision and contributing their expertise to make it a reality. I have an announcement, Eleanor said, calling for everyone's attention. As of today, the Adaptive Technology Division is officially greenlit for full production development of both the smartphone platform and the children's glasses. Cheers erupted throughout the lab. This meant not just validation of their work, but expanded resources, additional team members, and accelerated timelines, all crucial for bringing their innovations to the people who needed them most. Additionally, Eleanor continued once the excitement had quieted somewhat. I'm pleased to announce that the board has created a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer for Adaptive Technology, and they've unanimously selected Marcus for the role. The team erupted in applause and congratulations, surrounding Marcus with handshakes and pats on the back. Louis looked particularly proud, as if his mentor's success somehow validated his own choice to follow this path. Speech! Someone called out, and soon the entire team was chanting for Marcus to say a few words. Unaccustomed to being the center of attention, Marcus nevertheless stepped forward, looking at the faces around him, brilliant minds who had chosen to believe in a vision of technology that served humanity rather than the other way around. He felt a deep responsibility to articulate what they were building together. 6 months ago, he began. I was fixing carburetors and hoping for enough oil changes to cover the rent. Then a woman with broken glasses walked into my garage, and everything changed. He glanced at Eleanor, who was watching him with quiet pride. But what really changed wasn't my job title or my bank account. It was my understanding of what's possible when we refuse to accept that things or systems can't be fixed. Marcus gestured at the prototypes displayed around the lab. What we're creating here isn't just new technology. It's a new relationship between people and the tools that shape their lives. We're saying that technology should empower rather than limit. That access to repair is a right, not a privilege. That durability is as important as innovation. He looked at each team member in turn. "I don't have fancy degrees or corporate experience. What I have is absolute faith in what we're building together and in why it matters. So thank you for believing in this vision, for contributing your brilliance to make it real, and for proving that the most powerful innovation often comes from simply refusing to accept that something broken can't be made better than new." The team's applause was heartfelt, and as they returned to celebrating, Marcus found himself beside Eleanor near the window overlooking the campus. "So," she said quietly, "will you accept the position?" Marcus gazed out at the void, the buildings where his ideas were becoming reality, at the community workshop where people were learning to reclaim ownership of their technology, at the construction site where the expanded adaptive technology campus was taking shape. Then he looked down at his hands, the mechanic's hands that had fixed countless engines, repaired a pair of broken glasses, and were now helping to reshape an industry. Hands that his father had taught to see potential where others saw only problems. "Yes," he said finally, "on one condition." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Which? That I still get to use these hands," Marcus replied, holding them up. "That no matter what my title is, I stay connected to the actual work of repair and creation. The moment I'm just signing papers and attending meetings is the moment I stop being useful to what we're building." Eleanor smiled with understanding. "I believe we can make that arrangement. After all, Hayes Innovation doesn't need another conventional executive. It needs you exactly as you are." As the celebration continued around them, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him here. From a struggling mechanic to Chief Innovation Officer in 6 months, from fixing Wapan, others might discard, to creating technology that could transform lives around the world, all because he'd taken a moment to help a stranger with broken glasses. "You know," he told Eleanor quietly, "my father used to say that how you treat people when there's nothing in it for you reveals more than all the business deals you'll ever make." "Your father was a wise man," Eleanor replied, "and he raised a son who's going to help change the world, one repair at a time." Outside the lab windows, the sun shone brightly on the Hayes Innovation Campus, illuminating not just buildings and technology, but a future where broken things could be made whole again, where craftsmanship and care still mattered, where small acts of kindness could spark revolutions. Marcus Reeves, once just a mechanic with gifted hands, now stood at the forefront of that revolution. And as he rejoined his team's celebration, he carried with him the simple truth that had started it all. Sometimes the things others might discard are exactly the things that contain the greatest potential for transformation. The repair that had begun with broken glasses had expanded to encompass much more technology, systems, communities, and lives. And this was just the beginning.